All right. Well, Jake, are you ready to get going?
Yeah, let's jump into it.
Awesome. Okay. So I'll just do a quick introductions and then we'll go. So my name is Anna. I'm with Nava, and if you're not familiar with Nava, we are a benefits brokerage on a mission to fix healthcare, which is very ambitious, but we are powered and driven every day by bringing high quality, affordable healthcare to Americans, starting with those Americans, probably roughly 160 million Americans who rely on employee sponsored healthcare. And so we're a benefits brokerage to help that and improve the lives of Americans by doing that. Jake, do you want to introduce yourself?
Absolutely. I'm Jake Alsup. I'm the Director of Recruitment and Hiring at Community Counseling Center. We're a private, charitable, not-for-profit behavioral health organization that's located in Southeast Missouri. We're actually an administrative agent for the Department of Mental Health in Missouri and provide all mental, behavioral, and substance use services to the clients in our five-county area. Yeah, I've been with CCC since October of 2016, so running up on that 9 years, the agency.
Wow, that's so awesome.
I don't know what happened to the time, but it's somewhere.
Yeah, that's great. Well, I know, and full disclosure, I've known Jake for a few years, and I'm so glad you're here, Jake. I'm so glad to have this conversation with you. What you've been doing at CCC, I feel cool knowing the acronym, has been impressive. And the work that you're doing there and the work that CCC does is so valuable to those who you serve. So I'm glad to have this conversation. Thanks again, everyone, for joining us. Okay, Jake, to start us all off, can you tell us a little bit about your career path, how you got into your current role? I mean, you've had quite the tenure in 9 years. That's really impressive. Yeah,
Yeah.
just start us off by telling us about that.
Yeah, so I feel like I really need to start from the beginning because as more people, get to know me, they get a little surprised at where my career actually started. And to be quite honest, like I was a farm kid. I 10 years old, started on the family farm, and that was every summer, mostly into fall, while all the other neighbor kids were out, enjoying their summers and going on vacations and swimming. I was sweating. I was on the tractor. I was dealing with chemicals. Don't tell OSHA at 10 years old if that was the case. But I was out there and putting in the work from the age of 10 to 19 every single summer. I was out there helping the family. I really feel that my time on the farm, it really taught me that work ethic. And also really it taught me to stay busy or you're going to wish you were busy as well. So that kind of promotes what we're going to be talking about today too. But even after that, at around 19, that second year of college, I started slinging sandwiches at Jimmy John's, if anyone's familiar. Delivery driving, and then eventually I started tearing the transmission out, going into the store, all while juggling EMT class. I went to be an EMT while I was doing my undergrad, started working as an EMT for a local ambulance company in town shortly thereafter. And yeah, I was juggling that full-time student as well as accidentally finding myself in a leadership role at Jimmy John's as well. And then post-graduation, got a job at CCC 6 months later. And 6 months after that, I was promoted to my current title. And the rest is kind of history from there.
Wow, just like as if it was already planned out for you. Just
Something. Yeah.
so, was working in recruitment always kind of the plan, or did you take?
Not in the slightest. Actually, I got kind of lucky. So I do like talking about this because as an 18-year-old, come fresh out of high school and everything, I thought I could conquer the world and be
Of course.
everything that I could be. Yeah, and I chose medical technology as a major, which was just working in a lab. And yeah, that second semester of school after organic chemistry put me through the ringer. I decided it
Oof.
was a time for a change. And in high school, I was really involved in an organization called DECA, which is that business marketing related, similar
Oh,
in a way to FBLA, but in my opinion, it was better. Anywho, I figured that because of my time doing that, I could do a business degree. That easy. I can get through it.
sure.
Not a problem. I can get through my school. But my problem at the time is I felt that everyone and their brother and their mother and whoever had that business administration degree. And it was
Mm,
kind of a flooded market, that or marketing, same thing.
mm.
So I was like, well, let's do something different. I just want to have a job when I get out of school. I essentially threw a dart. It landed on HR, and I thought to myself, well, everybody needs someone to hire and fire people, right? This should be pretty consistent. So I decided to be a Toby Flenderson from the office and pursue a business degree in HR management. And again, I got ridiculously lucky because as I started going through the coursework, I really enjoyed it and I did feel that calling to it. And subsequently, I started enjoying the field itself, and here I am today. But no, recruitment was not the plan by any means. Again, I wanted to work in a lab, and
Yeah.
yeah, I got extremely lucky. Now, looking back, it makes sense to me now that I went into talent and went into recruitment just because I can talk to people. I enjoy having those conversations and making those connections. But no, ask me at 18, 19 years old, and like HR, no way. I don't, what are you talking about?
Yeah, what is and it's so funny as you described it as either hiring or firing, it's like HR is so much more complex
So much
than I
more.
think a lot of people realize, which I know we're going to talk about today in more detail. But wow, Jake, you talking about OChem? That's I also took that class.
Yeah,
I was a
yeah,
biology major, and wow, that was a tough class. If you can survive that, I think you can survive anything.
yeah, and
Which
I didn't.
maybe that
So
that's really what
tends to
puts you on your path for HR. Okay, so looking back, you know, you're already reflecting a little bit here too, but looking back, you mentioned there was like key moments. Can you talk to us a little bit about, what were those key moments when you realized you're
yeah,
stepping into something bigger than just, your job title or like this path that you're now on? Yeah,
yeah.
talk to us a little bit about
It's kind of the opposite though. I didn't realize, especially at the time, that I was stepping into something a little bit bigger.
that.
I it wasn't until way after the fact, and even really reflecting for our conversation today, that it's really making those connections. Because again, I started in community counseling center in October of 2016 as simply a recruiter, an HR recruiter. There was three other people on the HR team, none that was specific to recruitment, and they needed some extra help. So I came in. Everything was manual. We still had Indeed, so there was some of the searches through there, but everything else was through, yeah, Excel files, all paper files and tracking. There wasn't a really consistent way to manage all of these candidates that were coming in. So the first thing I did was in November, I started researching ATSs, applicant tracking systems. And by December of that year, I was implementing Community Counseling Center's first ATS. Looking back now, that was wild because this is my first job in this field, and I had no idea what I was really doing or what an implementation was, or even with the recruiting process we had, I had to make it up on the fly because we didn't have anything in stone. So I learned. I tried to take everything in that I could. I just jumped feet first into the fire and try to soak everything in. And I think a few of those other key moments that stick out in my mind though was shortly after that, I guess about 6 months, we implemented our first human resources information system, HRIS, Bamboo HR. And this was again 6 months after the ATS. I can tell you, not many people here were very happy with me because of all the change that I was pushing through. But we were using file cabinets. It was all paper, and we needed something a little bit more in the century that we were in. So that was another piece that really sticks out in my mind. I also had some big hand in our redevelopment of our performance management processes. And while my role, it's been recruitment, it's been hiring and onboarding, I really started stepping outside of that comfort zone, and I was able to
Mm.
dabble in that HRIS coordination and then performance, employee engagement. And I really feel that by stepping out and getting out of my comfort zone those times, 'cause again, I was green. I didn't know really what I was doing. I had to learn it as I went. The great thing though is after completing those projects, my confidence did start to increase. It started to soar. And sure, there's some of that doubt that creeps in. It's like, do I know what I'm doing? But by that point, it did feel like I could conquer at least anything related to an implementation after I got done with all those. So yeah, it did take some time. It was a lot of like looking back, but there's definitely those moments that I can kind of put the pin in and says, yeah, this was a big step for me.
Yeah, and it's so good to take that time to reflect and realize, like, okay, where you're at today, how did you get here? Because I think that sets up the tone. So I'm so glad you kind of walked us through your journey there, because I think that sets up the tone for this topic. We're here to talk about, and the perfect person to come and talk to everyone today about this is because of this theme of like just growing outside your lane. And when you hear that phrase, because a lot of, you know, whether you're in HR or not, I think we all try to think about like, yeah, what is our next step? How do we expand? How do we, move forward? When you hear that phrase, what does
Mhm.
that mean to you personally? And how should we
Yeah.
all be thinking about it?
Well, when I hear growing outside of your lane, honestly, my mind just immediately goes to doing what needs to be done. Reflecting on my experiences, I don't feel as I've ever batted an eye when it came to jumping outside of the lane, to helping where, someone needed help, to making myself busy if need be. So yeah, didn't have that strong talking to from those family members on the farm. This can be a double-edged sword, 100%. But to me, it has been simple. Something needs to be done. If I can do it, I'm going to do it. Or if I can't, or even someone at the agency, isn't aware, doesn't know how either, then I'm going to dive in. I'm going to Google. I'm going to start learning what needs to be learned. So again, we can find that solution. We can find what needs to be done. And I feel like that's where that growth really happens because having this mindset of, willingness to jump in, it's not only expanded those knowledge, skills, and abilities. I use the nice little KSA language there, but it's opened up some really awesome opportunities for me too. If I hadn't jumped out of my lane, if I hadn't explored these options, or even just got myself a little uncomfortable, I wouldn't even be here talking to you today. So I put a lot to being able to work in that little bit of a gray area, I guess.
Wow. That's really good because I think it's so valuable to know and understand, like, that it was a gray area. Sometimes you don't even realize that you have, there's things that have shaped your career in the past, and you've been able to, you know, restructure or Google or like just keep learning. Um,
Yeah.
and so I am curious, looking back, and it sounds like there has been patterns or habits, or maybe
Mhm.
you're just out of fear consequences of being talked to on the farm or not. I love that. I love that you're like deeply rooted in this like just hard work mentality. How have you approached those new challenges that have helped you
Yeah.
drive that growth?
Yeah. Well, it's kind of going back to it. Yeah, I've always been that person to just jump in. And if I do find something interesting, then I start learning about it. And honestly, I guess shout out my ADHD for that one. But granted, looking back and thinking about the ability to jump in here and to really expand on my knowledge and growth, I like to mention that one of the implementations that I did with the ATS and like the human resources system, I outside of those ATSs and HRS implementation, I got the opportunity to assist in an Okta, which is a single sign-on
Oh
provider,
yeah.
and Bamboo HR integration build, which taught me a whole lot about APIs and how they operate. Again, looking at a lane, this isn't something that talent would usually do. What person in HR is, really looking at APIs and figuring out how to mesh these systems together usually falls to an IT team. But since I took that time to learn the ins and outs of the system, they came to me. They asked me for that help, which again is stepping outside of my typical lane. Additionally, like there's others such as like the performance management redesign, which is a huge learning opportunity for me and even those marketing related responsibilities, playing hands in our rebrand efforts, being the
Mm.
first one to use AI as a resource at our agency. Even last year, we implemented a new payroll system, and I was the go-to as a kind of a co-leader for the implementation. And it's still going to this day of being that person that gets those emails, but wonderful, love helping. And most of these things they're not recruitment, but without stepping outside of my lane, without being pretty we'll say open with the other duties as assigned, uh, it wouldn't have given me the confidence and the knowledge that I have.
Hmm.
And I can attribute this growth and I guess my mindset to these more non-talent related tasks. Hopefully that answered your questions.
Yeah, no, that's like perfect because I really do think it is a mindset. I think first and foremost, as we think about and talk about, just growing outside your lane, whether
Mhm.
it's us personally or we're helping others, on our team, coworkers. Um, I think it is truly a mindset. So I am curious, and as you talked about some of these opportunities you've had, like with performance management, the Okta integration with Bamboo, uh, and the payroll, like were these things that someone came to you and said, "Hey, Jake, can you come help with this?" Or was it opportunities where you're like, "Wow, my skill set can totally help here. Let me step in and do X, Y, and Z."
So it's a little bit of both. On the Bamboo, like the initial Bamboo implementation side, I did volunteer as an option because I had just done the ATS implementation, so I had decent knowledge on it and love my team to death. They may not be the most, as they say, techie individuals, so it kind of fell to me, and that was great because I loved having those opportunities and for the actual payroll implementation, it was asked of me because of my previous time spent. And on the Okta Bamboo HR integration side, they asked me, and I was like, well, yeah, for sure. Let's, I don't know a whole lot, but I can dive in and let's figure this out to make it work. And that was such a great experience too. So another piece I didn't even mention was that ATS that I had done. Um, yeah, I guess it was around 18 or 19, but I was able to integrate them into Bamboo HR because we were doing something different outside of that job board that they had, but having the background knowledge from everything else, it made it really easy to set up, create. Took, I think, maybe 1 or 2 hour calls with the implementation team to get everything squared away, but I did most of the
Hmm.
legwork. And again, while yeah, ATS is talent, but API and integrations not typically something that one in my role would usually see. So it's been an awesome experience. And yeah, to have that, I guess, confidence boost for myself when I am asked, like, hey, you know your stuff, can you help us out with this? And even if it's something small today of like creating a survey, Microsoft Forms or how to automate that,
Hmm.
I'm typically someone that people ask. And
That's
says my
cool.
email, it's about a lot of other questions too that I'm always willing to help out on.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, it's great too because like these gray areas
Mhm.
that, like you said, aren't in your job description, but you've identified as like opportunities for growth. You having that mindset sounds like from just a series of things that you've been able to do. Like how uh, how can someone tell the difference between being proactive and being seen as overstepping when you think about your job description of like, okay,
Yeah,
that wasn't on your job description, but you're doing it and you have the confidence to do it. I'm just curious, like, yeah, how you
it's
think about that.
it's a tough balance. It really is because I've had those conversations where people have felt like I've stepped on their toes, and I am not a person that wants to do that by any
Oh
means.
gosh,
I'm
no,
all about
no.
uplifting. It's like, hey, you're doing great. I don't want to make you feel bad by any shape or form. So in my opinion, I do feel that delivery is everything. If I have an idea on a process or efficiency improvement or whatever, and I know without a doubt it's not my lane. It's not my area. I'm not going to jump in and tell this person, hey, this is something you have to do or this is wrong. No one's going to be receptive to that. So
Mm.
instead, I try to tailor it in a way to where it's pushing them up. It's really hyping them up, I guess. And I'll create like a little write-up outline proposal if applicable, and I'll go to that staff member, the department head, whomever it is, and bring the idea up from a place of I had this thought, I had this idea, and you're the expert. I want to get your feedback on it. And most of the times, I get a lot of good feedback from the staff. And I'm
Mm,
not someone that is all hell bent on getting credit either. For me, it's about bettering the agency. I mean, we
mm.
work in HR anyway, so I mean, credit, it's always one of those things we love to get, but at other times, yeah, it's usually that other feedback that we receive instead. But I do take that other duties on the job description a little too literally in those times. But by not having my name on it, by doing it from a standpoint of, hey, this is helping staff, this is helping the agency, I think that's what makes the biggest difference because it's not about me necessarily. I want to hype them up. If it is outside of my lane, if it would be considered stepping on someone's toes, I'd much rather have them have the resources and knowledge handy so that way they can then push it forward. I do have a good example here, which is with our marketing and branding. It wasn't until almost 2 years ago that we actually had a dedicated marketing staff, director of marketing at the agency. Prior to that, it fell to me because I could use the excuse of, well, recruiting, we need to bring candidates in. We bring candidates in through appropriate branding and advertising and this, that, and the other. So I put it upon myself to set up those parameters, branding best practices and guidelines when it came to flyers. And I've been really a stickler with sticking to those brand guidelines to promote consistency. And that's especially true post rebrand from last year. Well, this in mind, I noticed it's been about 6 or 7 months now, but there was a flyer that was going out on our socials for a support group, suicide bereavement support group. And the flyer itself had some room for improvement, we'll say. A lot of room for improvement. And I reached out to the person who I thought created the flyer. They're part of a committee for that program. And I approached it in a way, though. It's like, hey, this is a really great idea. I love that we're having this out here. Just compliment sandwich them like crazy. But then I asked, can I take a stab at trying a version out? And let me know what you think. Now, they didn't know I'd already done that. I'd created it 10 minutes before I even emailed them. I felt that
Mm.
passionate about, yeah, what that looked like. And I just asked them some of those questions that might have led them to my artistic direction, we'll say. Gave it a little time, and then I shared my version. They ended up loving it. And I
That's
told them just to
awesome.
take that flyer and run with it. Send it out to any others who may need it. Just do what they need to do. And like, here you go. You helped me with this. It's you that did this. So yeah, send it out. Let's get it out there. And it could have gone wildly differently. I could have just
Mm.
said, hey, this sucks. Use this instead. And that might have caused a little friction. But instead, I made sure that I got their input, I got their feedback, and I wanted that staff member to feel like they had just as big of a part in the revision and as I did. And I wanted them to be the ones to share the update. I didn't need the glory by any means. I
Mm.
did what I felt was needed to be done, and I made sure that the staff wasn't put out by it. So that was one of those examples where I knew that it could be an easy toe step, but yeah, it's just navigating that with a bit of grace and finesse, I think is what's
Mm.
important.
Wow, you're right. That could have gone way differently.
Yeah,
But the way you approach it said a lot. But I think it still goes back to like that mindset, like having that mindset of growth and your why very clearly stated at the beginning of all of this, of like you're there to help and support and move the mission, the agency forward. And
yeah,
it doesn't matter how or where it comes from. Okay, so Jake, you've talked a little bit about how these things are giving you confidence. I
mhm,
know, at least for me, myself, maybe others on the call, like sometimes that confidence doesn't come because when areas are gray, it's really hard to want to think you can make a difference. And so, something that's going around on the internet, and it's probably been around for a while, it's just, maybe
at the
more
name,
present.
right?
Yeah, today is like this idea of imposter syndrome.
Yeah,
And like, can I do this? Should I be doing this? Am I the right person to do this? And you're kind of giving us some examples on these things that have given you confidence along the way. So let's talk about imposter syndrome,
for sure.
how that's shown up for you early on in your career, maybe still today. How are you dealing with now? And like, what would you tell people who are also maybe feeling this way?
Yeah,
Me personally, Jake. So talk to me about that.
yeah, for
And what
sure.
advice would you give? Yeah.
Yeah, so imposter syndrome is still something that I still struggle with. I talk this big game, right? We have the confidence, we've done these things, but it still comes up constantly. And at the beginning, I distinctly remember it was post ATS implementation. I was getting ready to do a training for our supervisors on this applicant tracking system, and this is their very first, any type of experience with an applicant tracking system. And yeah, I was freaking out. And I've never been one that, has had trouble with public speaking or getting up in front of the class or however, but it was still that little voice in my brain. It's like they know you don't know what you're talking about. You're gonna mess this up, and they're all gonna know it. You don't know what you're doing. Enjoy that unemployment line once you're done. It's just a
Oh
bundle
no.
of nerves leading up to the training, and to say it was a bundle is an understatement. And
Mm,
what you know it, training went without a hitch. Everything went great. They loved it. They gave a lot of positive feedback. A couple things that I changed up for future ones, but it worked itself out. And even today, take today, leading up to and probably up until the end of this call, I still have that little voice that says, all these people think you're a chump, right? Like that you don't know what you're talking about. And I know that even when I was reached out to regarding doing this in chapters, my very first thought was, oh my gosh, they already have these all-star people, giving presentations. How can I compare to that? But it comes back down to that dealing with it part, right? We might have those tough times, those conversations in our head that says we can't. But for me, I personally feel that therapy helped me out a ton. And I know therapy is something, I work in mental health, it should be a given, right? But
mm,
this is something that took me a while to actually go and pursue and to talk to somebody about. This comes too from my time in EMS and a lot of the traumas experienced there. And yeah, if you talked about anything in that role, then you're off the rig, you're off your money making, basically. So I didn't. It took me a long
oh,
time. I struggled quite a bit, but then I finally used that EAP service that our company offers, got linked up with a therapist, and not only did they give me some really good resources, but he really normalized these feelings for me. And that, yeah, everyone, has these thoughts. This is a completely normal feeling to have. And again, he gave me those tools that I still use to this day when it comes
mm,
to that imposter syndrome that comes up. So now I try to remind myself of a handful of things whenever that voice starts really jabber jawing in my ear. Number one, in my opinion, I feel like it's that circle control. I have what I can control and
mm,
can't control what others think or say, but I can control how I respond to stimuli and how to process my own thoughts and feelings. Number two,
mm,
I do in fact know what I'm talking about. I've been working in some capacity for 20 some odd years at this point. So not only do I know a thing or two about work ethic, but I know HR. I know talent acquisition. I know HRIS. I know what I know. And if I don't, I also know that I'm a person that can go out and learn and pick this up too. And especially now, if I'm not feeling confident in my abilities, how many learning language models are there that's out there? How many AI tools? Even Googling something can get me somewhere. So even better, I can use
mm,
not only those, but the many people that are around me. I attribute a lot of my success to my supervisor, my HR director, who's been a mentor for me in these almost 9 years at the agency, but also even mentioning all these HR communities that are available. There's so many professional communities and spaces out there that
mm,
I can use as a sounding board and to get feedback. And just because I may fail at something, it doesn't mean that I'm a failure. It is an opportunity for growth. And I'll talk on that performance management first try here after a while. But that was something where I failed the first time, but it was a learning experience for me.
mm,
And there's something that one of my old professors had told me my first year of school is one of those university studies class, a speech class, actually. And she had said that when it comes to public speaking, it's not really about pretending that everyone else is in their underwear. That's not the trick. Instead, it's going in with that mindset that you know what you're doing, even if it may feel like that you don't. You get up there, and if you
mm.
have to, fake it till you make it. Because as long as you're confident and that we sound like you know what you're talking about, how are they going to know the difference? Now, they did go on to mention that, the people in the class are your peers and they don't really care about what you're saying. They have their own problems they're dealing with. But I usually leave that out of my own pep talk. But what I would tell you, if for anyone who's feeling that imposter syndrome is, if you're feeling like an imposter, it probably means that you care. And
Mm.
that's a really good place to grow from them.
Yeah, that's really good advice. It's like, and it's okay to care. So, you know, I mean, it's easy to be like, yes, if you're feeling like an
Right.
imposter, it probably means you care. It's a good place to grow from. I would say like, you know, um, or I would ask you, what other things, like what other advice would you give somebody to try to stay or try to do something outside their lane that feels underqualified, like kind of just move
Yeah.
beyond that imposter syndrome so you don't get stuck. Because I think what happens a lot of times, myself included, you want to do something, but you're just kind of getting stuck and you know, you don't know how to
Yeah.
get beyond it. I know you've already kind of shared, your own personal ways is like Googling, using AI, your resources. Um,
Yeah.
I am curious, like yeah, any other ideas as we're trying to make a list in our heads of like things we should be doing to help move along.
When it comes to that thought and feeling like I don't know or I'm underqualified and stepping outside of my lane to do this thing, this project, I kind of have that knee-jerk reaction of like, well, what's the problem here? So you're feeling underqualified?
We
Because,
all
and we
are.
talked about it, right? The amount of resources that we have is a bit overwhelming. You have so many of these different tools, whether it's your
Yes.
co-pilots or your chat or your Gemini, Grok, whatever the case is. It's hard to pick which one you need to turn to. But I would just recommend you have to take that leap. You have to take that leap of faith and try to dive in and learn. Build that confidence. Even when it comes to something like an AI tool. When it first came out, when ChatGPT was first announced, how many people did you hear about that was just like, oh no, it's AI. They're going to take over the world, right? It's
Yeah,
Terminator all over
right.
again. And now it seems like everyone tends to turn to chat or one of these learning language models, and they may not do all the research or verify it's not hallucinating, which is both great because they're using it and also a little scary because of what's being used and not edited. But
Yeah.
I think another good example of this and feeling in a way of like I don't know what I'm doing. I'm in stuck right here. I went
Mm.
from being kind of overwhelmed to automated. At one point, I was
Mm.
sending out what was called a 30-day evaluations to our new hires. So after the end of the first 30
Oh,
days, I
yeah.
triggered an e-signature through our HRIS, and they filled out a little questionnaire. And it was great in theory, right? We get the feedback. I can take this feedback and then have some data on it and can present that when needed, and also address issues as they come up. But the problem was it overwhelmed me. I got overwhelmed because sure, I could kind of pull this data. It required me to download each PDF out and then go through and sign every one and then try and extrapolate it to Excel. It was ridiculous and I was getting behind. So one day I just
Mm.
sat down and tried to brainstorm. How can I fix this? What can I do to make really my life easier? How can I not work as hard? Going back to my dad, work smarter, not harder. That's one of his many things. But I started thinking about it, and I knew through some of my previous outside of my lane work with Office 365, there was an application called Power Automate, which was supposed to, help automate tasks and flows. So I decided to check it out. And when we talked about overwhelming before they made some of the UI updates, yeah, Power Automate was tough for me. I opened it up and I was like, what is this foreign language that I'm looking at? So I decided to research. I went through the Microsoft Learning Labs. I scoured the training documentation on their website. I watched YouTube videos. About a month or so later, I built my first flow, and it was just a monthly email reminder. I used to send out monthly reminders about the Employee of the Quarter nominations, or hey, here's our referral process. And that was a manual process. So I automated it. A week later, I
Mm.
completely redeveloped my 30-day evals, turned them into Microsoft Form surveys, built out a flow that not only took all of their responses and added it to a list. but I took that a step further and was able to specifically share that with the supervisor and their supervisor,
Oh, cool.
all without having to touch anything and while retaining the confidentiality for the other staff that was there. So now, outside of reviewing the data, following up with staff that need it, I haven't had to manually touch those evals in almost 3 years at this point.
Wow.
And
That's
that saved
cool.
me a ton of time. But at the beginning, I had no idea what to do with Power Automate. I was unqualified to use it
Hmm.
100%. But now it's one of those best friends that I have. It's one of those things I turn to for anything I need to automate. And it did. It took me stepping outside of my comfort zone into
Hmm.
that gray area of those other duties, and it allowed me to learn something new and, yeah, make my life a lot easier as well in my job. And the best part, nowadays, we have AI that can pretty well build most of those flows for you too.
Yeah, that is so true. That's such a great example of just starting somewhere. Like, just
Mhm.
don't be paralyzed, just start doing something and then just figuring it out, going to your resources. You're right, AI can help us do a lot of things to automate it. Um, and take the next step. Like we have, you're absolutely right. Like there should be no reason why you can't take the next step, even if you don't have any clue. There's so many resources out there. I like Google and AI. I that's yeah. It sounds so simple. So everyone, myself
Yeah, so
included,
simple,
yeah,
right?
let's just start somewhere. But I think that is, yeah, I think that's the encouragement. And then,
For
like you
sure.
said, it gives you that confidence. And I can see it from your past experience. I think if we all self reflect, we can, truly self reflect. We can see it in our own lives about, being confident or gaining confidence by realizing we have done things to move us forward, get into those gray areas, learn something new, etc. Okay, so you mentioned this a little bit, so I think I might know the answer, but you were talking about maybe a supervisor or a
Yeah.
mentor you had. Let's just hit on that a little bit. I don't want to go
Yeah.
so over into like AI will help you do everything because I do think there's
Yeah,
still
right.
like a human element of like us playing that
100%.
role, or maybe you've played that role for, others. But yeah, let's talk about the role of mentorship and how
Yeah,
valuable
so
that is.
first, for myself, I feel like mentorship is ridiculously important. Again, going back to my supervisor, she is our agency's HR director. She's the one that hired me on for this position, and she's mentored me and has encouraged my growth and development like no other. And as you may have gathered, I'm a bit of a nerd, and as I said, the office
That's cool.
designated techie guy. They call me, not IT first, when an issue happens over at my office. So
Oh.
while she may not know, those ins and outs of everything I'm talking about when it comes, especially to tech or automations or API, she's always taken that time to listen to my ideas, and also really important to this conversation, to reel me in if I do start getting a little too
Mm,
far out there, which I need. If I start straying from that path, if my focus isn't where it needs to be, she has been the one that brings me back in and brings me back to realities like, hey, I understand like this is something that you're really passionate about and that you want to do, but we gotta change that mindset a little bit. And again, I
mm.
can't sit here and say that that hasn't happened. I haven't had those conversations first. I have, and it's needed for me. Like I said, I have ADHD. I love just going every which way. So having someone that I can turn to that will have those real conversations, but also do it from a fact of like, she wants to teach me. I want to learn from her, and she has
Mm,
really enhanced my growth in my position and in my career. So I can't speak
mm,
highly enough about her. And also those people that I work with too. One, it's great to just work with a bunch of therapists in general. Makes it easy
mm.
if you need to vent some. But also I have these people in my organization that I can turn to, that I can, throw these ideas out to, and they're here to support me, which I feel is just wonderful as well. And for myself, when it comes to stepping outside of the lane and mentoring someone else, I have provided that as feedback. We've had these
Mm.
internal staff that, apply for supervisory or leadership related positions. And, unfortunately, there's someone else who might meet the competencies better. They're a better fit for the role. But I really try to pose this to them as this is a learning opportunity. And if you want to
Mm.
build these leadership skills, if you want to build your marketability, I guess, to start making a name for yourself. Step out of your comfort zone. If you
Hmm.
see those opportunities to provide supervision for an internship or to volunteer for this committee for marketing, jump in on it. It's not your role, it's not your job necessarily, but this is a good way for you to kind of get outside of that comfort zone and further develop the skills that you want to grow.
Yeah, I like that. Yeah, that's really important. If you know where you want to go, uh, look for those opportunities and then yeah, do something about it. That's well said. Um, okay, so here we're talking about, career growth, career
Mhm.
development. If there was a chapter on this, which I'm not sure there is a career development chapter.
We'll write it.
Yeah, you're writing it today, Jake. Um, what would you add to this chapter that no one told you earlier in your journey, but now with your 2020 vision, so to speak,
Yeah.
what would you add?
Mine's kind of two-part. I think the one that I wish I would have been told more and more often as I was that green, bright-eyed, bushy-tailed new HR person. You're not failing, you're growing. Much like a bike, you're gonna fall the first time you jump on it. Now, some of you may have just jumped on a bike and pedaled right away, but you could have also hit a tree. So
Oh.
something's gonna happen. You gotta learn. Yeah, you gotta learn from those mistakes. And it may not work out how you intended. But by taking that step, by failing per se, you have to take it in stride, readjust, and try again. So I do wish that I heard that as a
Hmm.
young person in my career was you're not failing, you're growing. But I think another important part is increasing your value. And when I say value, I'm not talking about monetary gains. I'm not talking about going out there to try and make all the money or go be the CEO. It's more intrinsic. Increase your value to the organization, to your department, to your supervisor, your peers, to yourself even. And again, it's
Hmm.
not about doing it to make the money or however, it's about doing it because it feels good and you're contributing to that mission. And I do see a lot where some of our new hires, it could be anecdotally, but they tend to stick to the job description
Hmm.
most of the time. I'm
Mhm.
happy if they stick to the job description and hit those tasks. And that's all well and good. If I can have every employee that comes into the organization that does just the duties, I'm pumped. I'm thrilled. But I will recommend to anyone who will listen that, try to find those other experiences, step out of that comfort zone, get a little gray if you can, because if I would never have done that, again, I wouldn't be here today. I wouldn't be having these conversations, have the opportunity to speak on these webinars or interact with other HR professionals.
That's good. I'm going to like write this on a sticky, Jake, because I think this is so valuable for us to like constantly remember. You're not failing, you're growing. Like that's such great
Yeah,
advice. Because I think it's not as cut and dry of like you made a mistake, you know, you failed. Like you are a loser. And I think that's the self-talk in our heads of like, you're
yeah,
failing, you suck at this. And it's like, no, actually, you're learning. The only way to really learn and grow is to realize maybe not what to do. But I'm
yeah, what not to do.
yeah, what not to do. So yeah, I'm just making a note here because I think I need this. I think maybe you're doing this for me, Jake. Not everyone else on this. No, I'm gonna write this down on a sticky. That's such great advice.
Yeah.
Okay, so that kind of leads us down and into this kind of concept of and you said something else too, of like increase your value. And like we talked a little bit about how you can
Mhm.
do that when you're looking for other opportunities, et cetera. So I think that rolls into this idea of staying in your lane versus creating a new one, which you have
Mhm.
definitely done being the tech
Yeah.
guy. That wasn't on your job description. Um,
Nope.
and I remember I had a boss who was like, when people would say, you stay in your lane. Some organizations kind of have that
Mhm.
culture of like, stay in your lane. And I had a boss who was like, there are no lanes. Like, we're all in the same lane. And that kind of, made me think about this conversation of like, okay,
Yeah.
we don't need to stay in our lane. So how do we create a new lane? You've
Yeah.
hit on it a little bit. Just want to dive just slightly deeper into this as we kind of wrap up our session and think through
Yeah.
like, yeah, what are these big takeaways of stepping into the gray, creating a new lane for us, either for ourselves or as we help others who are in our organization?
Yeah, for me, I feel like the staying in the lane topic, it does come back to growth, not only for yourself, but again to the agency. For
Mhm.
me, as everybody's kind of probably seen by now, that other duties as assigned has been literal for myself. And I feel like every year on my annual, we add at least an extra job duty or two to my job description. Just go and tack it on there. Whether it was internship coordination or managing the HRS. I mean, now we just simply say, okay, that's under other duties as assigned. But I feel like when it comes to this and kind of balancing it as well, I don't know, it's someone crossing the Grand Canyon on a slack line, because it's not always going to be easy to balance both. You
Oof.
can't, walk across it all willy-nilly. It's going to be a tough situation, I
Mm.
guess, is what I'm trying to get to, because it's not always going to be that new role. And you're going to run into that less than stellar feedback when it comes to trying to evolve a role itself. So I guess to just put it bluntly, you have to have those conversations. You have to have the good relationships with your C-suite, with your supervisor, with your HR teams, so that way you can kind of naturally evolve within your space, but also not limit
Mm.
yourself in those opportunities. I don't know what I would do if it came to the fact that I heard, no, you can't navigate outside of your lane. And I really like what you mentioned earlier, where it's everybody's in the same one. It's driving the mission of the organization, driving the mission of the agency. And if you don't have that, if you don't have that opportunity or that flexibility, that'd be tough. That'd be really tough for me. And so I know I kind of
Mm.
skirted around the question a little bit, but that's kind of where I'm at. I do feel it's about the relationships and the conversations that you have, and also the willingness to
Mm.
say, hey, this is something that I'm really interested in. And if they say no, you have to take it. It's not everything's going to happen right away, but maybe you'll have that opportunity, a little bit down the road too. So again, I've had to be reeled in. It's not fun having those conversations, but it's important to have as well because there's still those other competing priorities, and you have to play the time management and organization game.
True. And I think that's why I've really liked your approach and your mindset here is because you're putting it in a way of like, how do you think about it from helping the agency or helping the company or helping the mission move forward versus like, this is what I want? Because I think when you can
Mhm.
come from a place of that, and even in your own experience, you've kind of, those things that have naturally fallen in line for you is because you've come from that growth mindset of helping not just you, but the entire, you know, organization team move forward. So,
I wish I
um,
was selfish at times. Like that makes some things a little bit easier. Don't get me wrong, but you
right.
can't
Yeah.
can't do it.
But maybe not because you've balanced this so well of like, doing your job well with, taking on initiatives that aren't technically yours. And I like the imagery of what did you say? Your
Yeah,
what?
so when it comes to balance, it is
Yeah,
walking across the Grand Canyon
that's
on a
it.
slack line without a safety rope
I thought
because
that's
I
what you said. I
don't.
was like, whoa, that's some good imagery there.
Well, I don't want to lead anyone the wrong way because it's not the easiest to balance. I mean, let's call this what it is. It's a struggle with saying no, right? I want to
Oh,
help. I want to be useful. I
yes.
want to
That's
be that person that someone relies on. I want to contribute, right? I want to generate that value, like we mentioned
mm,
earlier, but it does come at a cost. There's only so much time in the day. There's only so much that you can do with that work day without burning out. And I'm
mm.
sure those of you that work in talent know, you have to be on top of those candidates or you lose them. It
Oh
is a
my.
balancing act.
Yeah. Yeah.
When you take on more, you have to be willing to take that direction, to take that constructive feedback, to have that conversation with your supervisor, boss, whomever, and know when it's time to kind of resettle and refocus. And
Mm.
that does mean eating crow when the time comes to. Like I am the very first where if I mess something up, if something drops, that's on me. Like I would take that every time.
Mm.
And because, I get it. It's hard. It's the nature of the game whenever you are, yeah, operating in the gray a little bit more.
Okay, so I'm so glad you brought up burnout because I feel like that is probably a whole other discussion. You could come back and we could do a whole, missing chapters on because it's I don't know what it is, but it's definitely happening and maybe more and more people are becoming more burnout. So it's just like top of mind for me. But as you brought it up, I'm wondering how you protect yourself from burnout when you're
Yeah.
thinking about all these things, the balancing act that you're doing.
Yeah, so for myself, I guess it is a little bit of that ADHD that helps, but I feel like having that ability to expand outside of my job description has assisted me in not burning out.
Mm,
Quite honestly, when I took this job and my supervisor and I at the time had the conversation where it's like, I expect you to be here for 5 years and then you'll, go on to bigger and better things. Like, yeah, that's kind of in my plan. And yeah, we're here almost 9 years later, but it's because I've had those opportunities, I feel like, to do different things, to not do the same thing every day, not have those same talent struggles and trying to get in touch with candidates or no call, no shows, or the same new hire
mm.
orientation day that I've done every Monday for the past 7 years. Okay, well, I switched it up a little bit about 2 years ago, but having that, kind of differences in the day, it's what keeps me going. Keeps me has that variety for me, because then to kind of hit on one of our Q&As here, there have been times where I've wanted to walk away, where it is too much, where I
Mm,
am burnt. And a great example was during that implementation, because burnout not only affected me, but it affected my family. Because I was co-leading that implementation, and there was at
mm,
least 25 hours a week that I was spending on implementation and managing all the various imports, plus still doing my director of recruitment role, which is almost 40 hours in of itself. This resulted in late nights and a lot of high stress. And what
mm,
kept me from just bouncing out, because I had every intention, like after implementation is done, I'm looking, was it's the fact that I have these abilities, I have the support that I need to be successful. So I decided to stick with it, and I'm glad that I did, because it could have been easy. It's like, nah, I'm done. Good luck. But that's not me.
mm.
Like, that's not driving the mission. That's not driving the agency forward. I believe in what we do. So having those opportunities has been super helpful. But to better answer your question about burnout, I lean on my team. I have an awesome HR recruiting assistant, and she's my right hand. So she keeps me here, and keeps me going and organized too. But also, I've got, now 6-year-old twin boys at home, so they keep us pretty busy. But it does help
Ooh.
knowing that what I'm doing, as tough as it may be, it's for them. It's for them, my family. And, I also like
Mm.
to sketch and draw. While I'm a harsh critic myself, my boys love if I can
Oh.
draw them a Pokemon and it looks semi like it. So we'll keep it going. And also, I really like the solitude that, like, hunting. I'm a big hunter here in Southeast Missouri, that
Oh.
provides too. Even if I don't see anything, just having that nice quiet time out in nature is big for me.
Yeah, no, that's good. I think I love that you are kind of talking to both sides of like burnout of like, and I forgot. So thank you for putting in the chat. We do have another webinar coming up. Sounds like I need to attend that one. The balance of having, you can work all these hours, but knowing that also will impact your home and your family life is
Yeah.
so valuable and what you need to do to address that. And if you don't know, figure it out because
EAP.
yeah, yeah,
EAP
EAP.
resources.
Yeah, that's a great. So yeah, using your resources to ensure that, you're taking advantage of it. And so, yeah, thank
Yeah.
you for addressing that questions from Sonia. Her question was there ever a time you wanted to walk away and what made you stay? And it sounds like, yeah, this implementation was way too much, from an
Yeah.
hours perspective. But again, going back to your mindset, your why of like what you were doing, why you were doing it, helped you stay focused and grounded and avoid burnout. But continue down the path with CCC to
Yeah.
further the growth there. So, okay, this has been amazing, Jake. I could probably keep asking you questions, and we could probably even go even deeper. So, we kind of have to wrap it up just on time's sake, but
Yeah.
thank you so much for being here. I have one last question, and that's just
Shoot.
to end on kind of this, just a little tip here on, if someone who is here with us or will be watching this later, they are looking to grow, and they're maybe feeling stuck in their role right now. What is
Yeah.
like just a couple quick things to end us to help them get outside and explore outside their lane, outside their job description?
Yeah, so I'm going to toss something in the chat that I was thinking of. Again, we talk about AI resources and tools, and I know a lot of our staff use it as a therapist for itself. So I put in a prompt that I encourage everyone to maybe take a look at and utilize as a
Ooh,
resource. But
yes, love it.
my go-to pre-AI, having this person I can talk to, was what is a job duty that I'm currently doing that I can make easier on myself? Or what would assist me in doing my current job better?
Hmm.
Sit down and look at your tasks, look at your day to day. Is there anything that seems a little clunky, something that's eating up your time that really shouldn't? See what you can do about maybe automating these processes. If you automate 30 minutes, it's 30 more minutes of outside the lane work that you could do. And maybe you do a lot of exporting to Excel, but aren't super well versed. Do an Excel course, watch a YouTube video. Essentially, you have to make the effort to start taking those small baby steps outside of your comfort zone. And I feel like that'll really help explore that gray area outside of your lane.
I like that. Like that. And even if it's not like job related, it could be to like kind of
Yeah.
just practice before you get into a real project. Um, that's such a
Oh,
great.
sorry, I put that in everybody. There we go. I put it in the actual chat now.
Oh, perfect. Yes.
I sent it to
Awesome.
just just
Oh,
us.
just
Yeah,
me.
my
I was
bad.
like, I see it just fine. So I'm so glad you called that out. Okay. Well, Jake, this has been awesome. If you're not a part of our community, please join because that's a great way to continue this conversation and talk to us, talk to Jake, talk to others who are also experiencing this or want to continue the conversation about AI. So that's such a great tip, Jake. Jake, thanks for sharing that.
Absolutely.
Okay, and then really quick before we end, missing chapters next month is I think all about. Sorry, I went out of order. Yeah, creating psychological safety, which trust is a big part of that. So please join us next month if you can, and then join us next month for more chat about what has been missing from all the chapters like this one of growth in our handbooks. So thanks again for joining us, Jake. You've been incredible. I am
Thank
putting
you.
a sticky on of you're not failing, you're growing. I think that's such great
Absolutely.
advice. So thanks everyone. We hope you have a wonderful day.
Thank you.